Hey guys, welcome back to yall-itics. We're at a place that I've heard so much about over the years, but I've never actually been here. We're at Oak Cliff Brewing Company, and where else but Oak Cliff?
Which also goes by Oak Cliff Beer Hall. And it is right here at the Tyler
Street Station.
Tyler Station, yeah, if you're coming down Dart. This building that we're in is called the Tyler Station, or known as the Tyler Station. Do you know what this used to be?
It was probably a warehouse of some
What kind?
type. Textile.
Wrong again.
Beer?
Nope. It was, I'm told anyway by the barkeep here, that this used to be the old Dixie Wax Paper Company, a 100,000 square foot facility.
The paper cups?
You remember the paper cups,
Yeah.
how they had kind of that liner in there so that the paper didn't just disintegrate?
And that's where they came from right here, huh?
I
And
guess.
they put them on trains and ship them out to market?
That would have made sense.
Have you've been on drinking already, so I'm not sure if you should take that story for what it's worth.
Well, I've already begun. I'm having the Hefeweizen here. I couldn't decide. They say that the Hefeweizen and the lager here are the two biggies, and they would not help me decide between the two of them. And then I looked down at the menu and decided the Hefeweizen, because it has balanced flavors of banana and clove with tart and dry side of the beer.
And if you've been watching or listening to yall-itics for a minute, you know he's all about fruity beer here.
Love to have a little bit of fruit in there.
And I thought you
Feels
would,
healthier.
I thought you would get mine. I have the Lee Hazy Oswald. So when he's coming over with the drinks, I thought this was the Hefeweizen because it's so hazy until I recollected what it was called, the Lee Hazy Oswald.
Yeah, I was surprised that you-
aggressively dry hopped.
Yeah, I was very surprised you ordered an IPA.
Because it has it's a hazy IPA, obviously, with juicy stone fruit and melon flavors.
Now who's going for
I
that?
got in on this early because I thought you were going to pick this,
Okay, and this, of course, is a nod to
Mr. Oswald.
the Texas Theater here
Oh,
in
and
Oak Cliff.
Yeah, well, Lee Harvey Oswald lived in Oak Cliff too.
Right, and they are trying, I was talking to the guy behind the bar here, they're trying to represent all of Oak Cliff. Do you know how many official, and this is just official neighborhoods there are just in the Oak Cliff portion of Dallas?
14.
34.
Really?
I think it was 34. It's either 34 or 36. It's in the
34?
34. I got it
Wow.
right the first time. I was going to
Yeah,
have to start looking that up.
I know, and you would go for it. Hey, before we get going here, a shout out to some listeners. I'm thankful when people listen and say, hey, we appreciate it, or that was a terrible episode, or whatever it may be. But
I'm less thankful when they say it was a terrible episode, though.
I introduce myself as Jason Wheeler when they say that. Well, I'll make sure Jason Whiteley knows about it, but my name's Jason Wheeler. We were covering the AKA National Convention, the Boulé, and the vice president spoke there a few weeks ago. It had several AKA sorority members come up and say, hey, you guys do that podcast, yall-itics.
Oh, wow.
And we took a picture, and they're from North Texas.
They knew it name and all.
They knew it, every bit of it. I said, what do you think about the podcast first? They said they liked it, and that's when I said, I'm Jason Whiteley. I said,
Actually,
we
I'm not
appreciate you
Wheeler.
listening. Yes. I introduced myself correctly there. And let me bring this up, because this is from our mailbag, the yall-itics mailbag here. Last week's podcast was about the fastest growing minority group in this state, and it's Asian Americans, outpacing whites, blacks, and Hispanics. But a listener said use of the word minority may not be the right word that you guys wanted to get across. Maybe it's marginalized people. Should you call them marginalized? I'm like, I think
There's a connotation
marginalized-
there, too, though.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a negative connotation that people are in the margins and they don't have any say or political influence, political power.
But she's saying minority is also negative connotation then.
That was what she suggested as well too. I appreciate the feedback. I think minority might be the right word for this application, though. What do you think?
That's a tough call. We were sitting and brainstorming about this with the producer of the podcast, and I thought, okay, well, then what is the word? And we started going through different words, and it's like, nope, that one can't be because of this, and that one can't be because of that. So it's like you do get down to the point where you just say, well, are we just going to say population group? And not really put that label in front of it. Don't know. I think that I remember you saying, though, in the podcast, the last one, that the white population is minority in Texas now.
Oh, yeah.
As well.
Yeah, the Hispanics, people identify as Latino or Hispanics are the
majority.
The majority in the state, and that happened a couple of years ago. Long been predicted it was going to happen, and it happened a couple of years ago. So for what that's worth, that's good feedback, and that's something that we actually talked about here, not over a beer, but we've talked about since we got that feedback. So thanks so much for that, and shout out to the AKA ladies who regularly listen. We appreciate it.
And if you have a good word that we should use there, we can try out a few more. It's a tough thing, Whatever, race you are, if you've got a better
Yeah.
word that we could use there, let us know.
I got to tell you a word that I didn't know until I covered the AKA convention. I feel like I've been around for a minute, but I didn't know boule.
Boule.
No, I'm not in the sorority,
Tell us what it means.
but I don't know what it means. It's a convention. It's a national convention. But everyone said, "Oh, you're going to the boule." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I'm going to the boule." Daryl? What does boule mean?
I understand it is like
You don't know either.
the national convention because we call my fraternity,
Yeah.
South Phi Fraternity Incorporated. We call it
Amazing.
conclave.
The conclave.
Conclave,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Which is a meeting.
And
Okay.
All the other fraternities.
All right.
that we're-
So, do you know what it means? And get off of Google.
That's
Get
why.
off-
Well,
look
this is
at it.
why. This is
Look at this.
specifically.
Put this down so people can see.
You went to the boule and still don't know what it is.
I don't, but I was
That's
giving
a
the ladies a
problem.
shout out. Is what I was doing.
I was just
for
trying
them.
to get us a definition so that we could move on.
But you asked me like you knew what it was.
Okay, a boule. No. I must
Google
be,
doesn't even know what a boule is.
Do you know how to spell it?
B-O-U-L-E.
Oh, okay. Boule. It says a
were you-
metal ball used in French boulets, a round loaf of crusty bread. It's none of these.
It's none of those, bro. All right, let's move on. Let's move on.
For another day. It's for another day.
Let's move on for the 3 people who are still listening. All right. All right. Hey, we're at Oak Cliff Brewing Company, and a friend of mine reached out to me about this podcast the other day. He said, "Hey, this is going on. We're trying to get something on the ballot in Dallas, and we're trying to get it on for the November ballot, which is going to have huge turnout in the state since it's a presidential election." And I said, "Well, listen, when you guys get to the point of actually confirming your signatures for the petitions that you put out in the city, and you take it to the city secretary and get it confirmed, let me know." Well, they did that. 160,000 total signatures to get these 3 things on the ballot that you'll see in Dallas if you live in Dallas. And we are talking about these because these will significantly change what the city is like, change what happens at City Hall, change what happens to tax money and accountability at City Hall.
How many signatures did you say?
160,000 total were collected, I believe. They only
Wasn't
needed
it
169? 69,000.
Pete's over there going, please don't take 9,000 off of my total.
So Pete Morocco's with us. He's the executive director from Dallas Hero, the organization behind this. Pete, first question out of the gate, what is a boule? Do you know what a boule
It
is?
sounds like a fancy word that I want to be associated with.
I don't know what it is. All right, so lay this out for us. So these 3 things are on the these 3 charter amendments. And for the people who don't know what a charter, a city charter, it's the constitution by which the cities across the state must operate. These are the constitutional amendments essentially.
And it gets
being
thick
proposed.
too. I looked up the Dallas one, and I think it's 151 pages total.
Yeah.
It's
But this is easy to read too.
Yeah.
I mean, at least it's simple language that you can read.
Well,
Right.
that's how we wanted it. You know?
and we'll talk about that language because there's some interesting nuggets in that. But can you just lay out the 3 things basically that you are asking voters in Dallas to have a look at on the November ballot?
Yeah. So number 1 is increasing security in the city of Dallas. Number 2 is increasing city leader accountability. And number 3 is citizen enforcement. We feel like those 3 together give you the full circle of what we're trying to achieve. A lot of time when you get one thing in a bill or one thing in a change that you don't actually see that effect carry all the way through. So we feel like the right way to package the change that we're looking for a safer, more thriving Dallas is to see an increase in police officers, and then to see an increase in the accountability to the city leaders who need to do that year after year. And then after that, citizen enforcement. If the city's just not following their own laws, the laws of Texas, or following the charter, then the citizens are going to have a cause of action to stand up and hold them accountable.
Which means the citizens could sue over that.
Exactly.
I think that's the easiest one, if you will. So I'll start with that one real quick.
Yeah.
That seems to be totally going to be facing a legal challenge to me. How do you think this, because state law even gives government employees immunity. How is that one going to pass legal muster?
Yeah, so the proposed language on there is actually very simple. If the city leaders were not following the law, if the city leaders are not following the laws of Texas, then there's a cause of action to go to the courts and say, we're going to hold you accountable, as opposed to just going to a city council member and at a meeting and complaining about it. That's just not sufficient. Everybody knows that. So I think that you may raise a good point, is that people may challenge us in court. I think we're going to win in court, because ultimately laws are there for everybody. They're not so that the city council can ignore them.
Do you think it's going to court though?
Well, not
if it passes?
No, I don't know. I don't have any reason to see that. I think that as long as the city council's behaving themselves and following the law, no, it's not going to court. Then we're not going to have any issue.
Let's say it does or doesn't go to court, and eventually this becomes the law of the land in Dallas anyway. Pete, there's going to be a wave of frivolous lawsuits that are going to come the city's way. When I looked up this charter just to see how long it was, I kind of scrolled through it a little bit, and I saw an item on there. One of the things that the city lays out that it does, okay? It says it defines, prohibits, abates, and suppresses and prevents all things detrimental to health, morals, comfort, safety, convenience, and welfare of inhabitants of the city. If I really want to start some trouble, I can identify any number of things that the city of Dallas does that I think, do not address my health, my morals, my comfort, my safety, my convenience. I could be down at the courthouse every day.
Yeah. A lot, you identified some language in there that's highly aspirational, but the issue with getting the language how we've got it and getting it in the charter, not just a deliberation before the city council, is it is a mandate. It is now law. So when the citizens vote on this in November, it will become the requirement upon the city council.
So, but what is the safeguard there? In other words, to keep me, the ankle biter who's down at City Hall every day, from just flooding them with suit after suit after suit.
And I would say that the Wheeler's more bark than bite. but good question though, Jason. What prevents that?
Nothing prevents somebody from walking in and filing a frivolous lawsuit right now, but there's, of course, penalties for doing that. And if you become a frivolous litigant, and that's what you want to do, there are consequences for that. And I don't think that this is really going to change that. If somebody comes in there and they're filing a frivolous lawsuit, then this is law that's going to be defined in case law. It's going to go up to the Supreme Court of Texas at some point, and they're going to say what's frivolous and what's not.
Yeah, but you don't see this mucking up the works at some point, potentially with enough people, where the city is just sort of in this quagmire dealing with lawsuit after lawsuit.
Yeah. I mean, there's real concerns here, though. One of the expressed concerns that we see is where you have laws, particularly that protect citizens from crimes that are simply not being prosecuted. This is very serious. And so if people are just saying, hey, I'm just not going to abide by the laws of Texas, I'm just not going to prosecute crime, that's something that's very concerning. When I first started this campaign, a lady shared with me her story about, I was just going out there to try to get support, and I wasn't expecting to get all this feedback. Hey, you're actually really right. What you're doing is very important. Every time I go into this shop, I'm terrified. I'm looking over my shoulder because now when I go into normal shops that I'm familiar with on Knox Henderson, somebody's coming in and they're robbing the store, and there's nothing we can do about it. And there's this feeling of impunity. We need to turn that around.
And nothing we can do about it because the DA said a few years ago, the district attorney in Dallas County,
he's just not going to follow the law.
He wasn't going to prosecute thefts below $750, I believe is what it was.
Yeah. I think you're right. But yet the fact that he put that number out there, still thefts way beyond that were happening, and that crime is just not even being reported.
Because people call the police say, why would I show up if they're not going to take a case?
I think that out of the three things that you're proposing here, this one is probably the one that raises the most red flags for cities across Texas, because this one would really change how they do business and their liabilities in dealing with the public. Is this something that, if this happens in Dallas, does the dam break? Are we going to see this? Does your group or another group go to Houston, Austin, San Antonio, El Paso, all points in between next and institute the same thing?
Jason, we're hoping that this forces a very difficult discussion, that people need to come back to the rule of law, which I think in this country we've really started to push aside. You've got activist prosecutors, you've got other people on city councils that simply don't regard the laws of the land. And so if we're seeing that kind of leadership from our city leaders, that's a difficult discussion that has to take place.
Let's go back to the top one on here, which on face value, it sounds good. And we've talked about this, or the city of Dallas has talked about this for more than a decade, that there just aren't enough police officers here. And this is not what citizens are saying. These are the stats, and the previous, two police chiefs have said this. The third one now says this. Dallas has about 3,000 police officers right now. It should have 4,000 considering the size of the city. The charter amendment that's on here says, listen, Dallas has got to, if you approve this charter amendment, Dallas has got to set aside the money to raise salaries up, to make that a job that you want to go to. So Dallas hires police and young recruits may not go to McKinney, where it may be a little safer and it pays a lot more money.
Yeah.
That sounds good on the surface, though.
Yeah. Well, so let's start with the fact that I think many like me believe that Dallas should be a best-in-class city. We should be setting the gold standard. And right now, amongst North Texas major police departments, Dallas is the lowest paid. That is a real problem. And you don't see that dynamic in a lot of cities around the country, where you have the Metropolitan Corps being paid $12,000 lower. Here, Dallas Police Department, their starting salary is $12,000 lower than Plano. Now, if you're considering going into law enforcement, what would you do? Where would you go where crime is lower and the pay is $12,000 higher? It's why we can't recruit. It's why we can't retain. And so at a minimum, we're saying in this, as you've seen here in the language, we need to be in the top 5 just in this area. The Corps has to be at least in the top 5. So these are not unreasonable standards. We know what the math is on that. It's something we can afford, and it's something that's right.
So you're saying basically, we've heard for years like we should pay our police officers more, we should hire more police officers. You're saying we want to take that from just being an aspiration and a campaign, talking point to make it absolutely required of the city that it raises the pay to this threshold and that it has at least this many officers. What is the cost on this? Because you've worked up numbers on this, in the background of this, I mean, we just ran a story on the television the other day about how Dallas is considering or there's a possibility of neighborhood pools going away because they've got to put money into something else. So how much is it and where does that money come from?
Yeah, so right now the Dallas budget is $686.2 million for the police department. We're proposing an increase that's going to cost $185.5 million. So that total is going to go up to $871 million. Now, the way the language works, and if you look at it, and it also is in the ballot language very clearly, what we're talking about is where you have this year-over-year revenue increase, that the top priority is going to be to spend on the police department till you get to this point. So this is it's a very streamlined change. It's very effective. It's not something that's going to be chaotic and radical where you suddenly have 1,000 untrained people that are going to be wearing uniforms, nothing like that at all.
It's a gradual thing.
It is. It's a gradual thing. We believe it's probably going to take 18 months to 2 years, may take as much as 3 years to get there. But the fact is it's going to get us more training. Let's take a step back. The reason we're talking about this is because response times are so poor. To the worst crimes that there are, you're looking at 12 minutes. 12 minutes for murder, shootings, and stabbings. That's completely unacceptable. It's completely below the national norm. The minimum standard would be 8 minutes. So then the next word is ratio. Ratio is how many police officers per 1,000 citizens. And that ratio right now is about 2.3. In order to get to 3 officers per 1,000 citizens, we need to increase 1,000 officers, and we need to do it quickly. So in order to get that response time down just to the bare minimum, is that we have to come up 1,000 officers. And so we also run into a couple other problems there. We have to make choices. What are the police officers responding to? It's not casual crime. It's not a right turn on red where somebody didn't come to a complete stop. These are serious crimes. And so for level 2 crimes, it's 107-minute response time. Now that priority means that there's still the risk of loss of life. And that means that the fire department, in most cases, is showing up before the police do. This is turning into chaos very quickly, chaos we can't afford.
But getting back to Jason's question, I don't think anybody listening to this would say, oh, no, well, I shouldn't say that. But I think a lot of people would say, we need more police officers to make sure that they can show up if somebody's trying to break into my house at the time. Getting back to Jason's question, though, what is this going to cost? Because there's only so much money that comes in to the city of Dallas, and I don't want to pay any more property taxes to make any of this stuff happen. No. So what does it cost, and does it come at a cost for other city services?
Well, and I'll go into some of those pieces when we start talking about the Second Amendment that we're proposing, because there are priorities that the citizens of Dallas are clearly laying out every time that these are our top 5 priorities. This is not the stuff we're spending money on. The number 1 is security. This is the most important thing to Dallas citizen. So why has that been shaved off with all these other programs and pet projects and things that are not helping citizens of Dallas feel more secure?
But has the money been shaved off? Because I recollect just in the last decade that the city has put more money to police officers to hire more. Now that says that the base was a hell of a lot lower than it is now. but they've raised the salary. It's not where it should be.
We have a $2 billion budget. And I think that if you're looking at a little over a 5% increase is what we're talking about here, not to that budget, but shifting the priority to the priority that the citizens have laid out, I don't see any reason why that causes some kind of increase in taxes. I absolutely would disagree with that.
Is there any concern in tying the hands of the city in a bad year or in several bad years? You think back to the Great Recession, you think back to the pandemic era, where even the state started ordering, 5 and 10% cuts across the board to make sure that the budget didn't get killed. What does this do if you're in the city now and you've got this mandate in your charter that this has to be totally left alone, and now you've got to figure out how to cut around the margins to make up for the cut that you can't make there?
So we're making exactly the same difficult choice that Police Chief Garcia is making. Is what matters most to you? Is it response to the right turn on red, or is it response to the murder, shooting, or stabbing? And the citizens of Dallas have said that the crime, that protecting the city and keeping it safe, that's the priority. So if we have to cut other pet social projects, if we have to cut other nice to haves, then that's what we're going to have to cut. But security is going to need to stay for our society to thrive.
What would you cut, though?
Well,
you're from Dallas. You're from Dallas. What would you cut?
I don't have the full budget in front of me today. So I'm not gonna go attack some of the projects that are down at the bottom of the priority list. But there's plenty.
Well, let me ask. I talked to
cut bureaucrats.
I talked to police officers ahead of this, and the Dallas Police Association, I believe, is one organization that you guys went to. But I talked to other police officers in the city of Dallas, and they said, "Yeah, this is great. We love it. Who wouldn't want a salary increase here?" But the problem, they say, is nobody wants to do our job. Salary be damned. People just don't want to do this job.
Yeah, they've been missing recruiting numbers.
And school district, the state required school districts to have police officers now, at least one at every campus, and these school districts can't even fill those positions either. Yeah. No one wants to do the job. What do you crank the salary up to get people in there?
So that's a difficult. Our math shows that at an $8,000 increase, you're going to see a difference, a measurable increase, and that's how we got to that number.
But is that hiring away from other cities, or is it new recruits, or what?
It's hiring away from other cities. It'll be new recruits, people that have never been trained before. I think you're going to get a lot of also just better retention. Right now, the attrition rates, and we can go over that here in a minute, but the attrition rates have just been terrible. And so there's no reason why we should be losing all these officers earlier in their career. And that's what's happened over the past 9 years. And so past 9-10 years, we've seen terrible attrition.
Yeah, people will come to the city of Dallas. They'll go through the academy. They'll train. The city will pay to make them a police officer.
3 or 4 years later,
and they're here for a couple of years. Then they go up to Coppell or somewhere like that, where they get a substantial boost.
And there's another dynamic. And you talked about a very important issue, and that's how this culture of attacking the police officer that's become, I think, a really poor trend over the past few years. And I think people are recognizing the effect of that. I brought up Portland earlier. Portland is a degenerate city. It's going to take
Portland, Oregon.
Yes, it is going to take decades for that city to ever have a future. And so people think it's maybe they're getting out in their little riot, and they're getting all of these kind of decadent ideas about how they're going to live in a world without police officers. That's completely ridiculous. And so now look at Portland. Portland has no future in the next few years. So it's decades away. So decisions like this that we make now about maintaining a floor, again, what I'm not proposing is some massive increase to us being one of the most highly police staffed cities in America. I'm talking about get us up plus 33% just to hit the floor.
And you think that and I saw a graph that you had with you earlier about response times and what that would do to those response times when you're talking about, quite a bit of time for the highest priority calls now.
Yeah. So the highest priority calls right now, as I said, are taking 12 minutes. But you see that when you increase that ratio to 3, and we've got things
so 3 officers per 1,000,
then you can get that response time down below 8 minutes, possibly as low as 6.3 minutes. And that's a very important stat. There's a couple other stats that you need to think about. If you're a Dallas police officer and you're going out on shift, and you're not going out on calls for light things. You are going out every night, and your calls are going to be murder, shootings, and stabbings. It's going to be death. It's going to be destruction. It's going to be the risk of loss of life. That's a lot to deal with. That is a heavy load to bear, right? And think about the overtime that these guys are working. We also don't want police officers working overtime week after week after week
make
after
up for
week.
shortages.
Exactly. And so now we're in this situation, maybe you saw it 2 weeks ago, I think there was an article in the Dallas Morning News that highlighted the massive amount of overtime that's been paid to police officers. So now you also get overworked, underpaid officers that are extremely exhausted. And I think with any job, you have to worry about decision making and just clarity. When you guys come out here after days of no sleep, I'm sure you start making decisions differently.
We
Even
don't
after-
have a lot of clarity right now with the hazy IPA I'm having.
Even
but-
after days of sleep, we don't do so well.
Well, let's get into, so those are the first two. The first one is citizens would have the ability to sue city officials in the city of Dallas if they don't follow the law, local ordinances, state law, et cetera.
Correct.
The second one is let's raise the number of police officers here by 1,000 to get us up to 4,000 police officers, which is the floor that I think everyone agrees is what the city should be at, but it hasn't been there for 10 or 15 years or so. The next one on here, again, on the surface, it looks great. Why not? And that is to make the city manager's job, the highest paid position at City Hall, a performance-based pay. So, hey, if you solve homelessness, we'll give you a bump right here. If you figure out permitting in this city, we'll give you a bump here. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, no, and the priorities that the citizens have laid out are crime, homelessness, litter, panhandling, and infrastructure, looking at the streets. And so if the city manager that we hire, to come in and replace T.C. Broadnax, comes in and does a great job, why shouldn't they be compensated? If they can turn these things around that matter most to citizens, then they should be compensated well. This is a $2 billion enterprise that affects millions of people. And so a manager, the chief executive of that enterprise, should be compensated well. But I think like everybody else, everybody understands if you don't do your job, you're probably not going to keep it. You're not going to get bonuses.
Sure, and Pete, the city of Dallas did this a few years ago, I believe, with A.C. Gonzalez, one of the city managers, and maybe T.C. Broadnax as well, where the city gave them performance-based bonuses if you can get this thing settled. I think permitting was one of the issues. If you can settle this right after the pandemic, then we'll give you a performance-based pay. And they never, the city managers never reached that, and that never got paid out.
Yeah, so the city managers report to the city council, and so there's a subjective measure there as to the standards that they set and the standards that we as citizens say, these are the things that are the most important to us. And if you're not meeting a bare minimum, you're not going to get a bonus, right? And so I think recalibrating that and people understanding you can't just continue to fail. There was continued failure year over year. How can you continue to get a $450,000 salary as a city employee year over year over year?
Is this all just about carrots, though? Is it just about, hey, if you can meet this, we'll give you extra? Isn't there a stick in here as well, where if you don't meet this, we can fire you?
That's exactly right.
So that takes it out of the city council's purview necessarily and says, hey, if they get an F on these, certain number of metrics, they're gone.
So we're looking at the 5 key metrics that I mentioned, and if you're failing on all but 2, then if you're only passing on 2 of those, then you're fired.
What are the 5 metrics?
All right, that's crime, homelessness, litter, infrastructure, and panhandling.
Now, Pete, that numbers can be very malleable, and you can give me 5 details that I've got to do in my job, and I can fail miserably at them, but I can make a great argument with supporting evidence of how I actually passed in all of those areas. Who enforces that?
This is based on the citizen survey. This is the citizens giving you direct feedback.
So we send out a survey
We send out a survey
every year.
Yeah, we send out a survey, and if more than 30% of the citizens say that something is a major problem, not just a minor problem, but a major problem, then you're failing.
Now, why more than 30%?
Yeah.
Why not a majority?
Well, again, we're looking at.
I use that M word.
Yeah. So
It's about marginalized.
Yeah. So we're looking at a very marginal standard here. This is very minimal. Yeah.
Marginal, majority, whatever.
Again, all of these amendments that we're proposing are based around the theory of establishing a floor. We're not going to go below this floor. And if you as city leaders aren't making it, you're out.
Who
right?
writes this survey, though, every year that I would take?
Well, so obviously this is something that's run past the city. I believe it goes before the city council, the city attorney. There's many people collaborating on it. So the language obviously can be phrased, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes, ballot language or question language can be difficult. I don't know that that's not going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it does.
Yeah, what if they write it in a way that doesn't agree at all with what you were looking for?
Well, this is why we have to have continued involved citizens
Well, you file a lawsuit.
year after
You
year.
file a lawsuit.
Well, yeah, you could do that, I guess, if that passes too. But and two, how do you make people pay attention? Because send me something in the mail, and I'm probably going to put that in the trash. And we see that people don't even show up to vote. So now you might get this super small sample, I guess, of people on a yearly basis, because this isn't even to go vote. This is to fill out something at home and send it.
Yeah, so to your point, when you have the people who actually give you feedback, you typically expect that to be more negative than positive.
Yeah,
so
right.
that's why we've set a bar that's just extremely low, frankly. I mean, I hate to say that, but we're saying, hey, can you actually meet the bare minimum?
I talked to a city council member on the way over here, and I said, hey, this is going to be on the ballot. Have you heard of it? And the council member said, yeah, I've heard of it. And we're kind of looking at it, and on the surface, it sounds like these are goals that we would like to have. Not the third one though. The council member had an issue with the third one about potentially being sued. But this council member said, listen, but here's the issue with this though. She says this doesn't belong in a charter. It's not an ideal to build government, which is what a constitution or a charter is. She says it's just too prescriptive. It should be these issues should be a resolution, an ordinance, or part of budgeting, a requirement in that, but not part of the physical charter. What do you say to that?
Well, that's a city council member that believes that she should be trusted, and this is because 9 years in a row they couldn't get it done, and so. Of course, if you're a city council member, you feel that this is hyper prescriptive, but it needs to hyper prescribe a floor that you can't go below. So if they are staying well above this floor, as they should, all of this is going to be irrelevant.
But isn't it up to the voters at the end of the day, though, to decide, listen, certain mayor or certain council members just aren't taking care of the city like they should. I want more police on the streets, and that mayor or that city council person is not doing that. I mean, don't voters get the final say on that?
Jason, I'll tell you why you're wrong. If all we needed were representatives and we didn't need a constitution, then you would be right. But we need a constitution
for them to follow,
and we need representatives to follow it and implement it.
So you've gotten enough signatures. You have to get 20,000 for each one of these. You got a total of 169,000.
Why are you looking at me, dude?
Oh, because you said 160. So 169,000. So easily these got through. They will be on the November ballot. Here's my question. What form will they take on the November ballot? Because you referred to ballot language. You have aspirational language in front of you that you have suggested to the city. That doesn't mean that that's the way it's going to come out when we actually see the ballot. And we've done a podcast before. I think it was called Who Writes This? SH and then a couple of asterisks or something there. Because a lot of these ballot initiatives you do not understand when you read them.
Yeah, you can't read these.
So how closely are you watching that language? And I guess you'll know the language in about 3 weeks from now.
Well, so we believe that this is the language, and I'll tell you why. The Texas Supreme Court ruled, I think it was 3 years ago, there is case law that says that language cannot be manipulated or mangled. And so we believe this is the language that they're going to have to stick to. And the only changes that they could make would possibly be minor, as long as it doesn't change the meaning or the intent. There are rules about that, and that's not the full Texas Supreme Court case, but they made rules. You can't change this language. So if they try to mess with this, we're going to be in court. We're going to be there ready.
And you kind of told them this, haven't you?
We have, and we've signaled it to them, but quite candidly, I think we're not getting that much pushback because they know this is right.
Oh, they haven't heard yall-itics yet. They haven't heard yall-itics yet. Stand by.
But mainly they know that the citizens understand this, and it's wrong to have these ballot language things that have double and triple and quadruple negatives that nobody understands.
Can't follow it.
No,
well,
that's not
and you
what
keep
this
talking about
is.
they and them. City council has to sign off on this. City council is the one that approves this language before it goes on the ballot in November. But you're saying that they can't really change this.
Well, because we had more than 20,000 signatures, no, we have a right because we had more than.
It'll be on the ballot.
It will
regardless.
be on the ballot.
But as far as the language approval goes, doesn't City Council approve the actual
Well,
language?
they can come in and they can fight. The city attorney could say something on their behalf, and they could make an argument, but they would lose that argument.
So you're going to be on the November ballot with these three things. We know that. What if I get extraordinary ballot fatigue, because this is going to be a big ballot in November. You're going to get huge turnout, so you have the potential for a lot of eyeballs on these three things that you're proposing here. But do people make it all the way to the bottom of this ballot and still have enough brain power left over to read this and make sense of it?
So to everyone listening, I say you must. You must. You have to get down the ballot, and I'll tell you why. Because there are not just these 3 initiatives. There is another citizen petition that's out there, and there are other city council raised amendment proposals that are going to be on there. We don't know exactly what all of those are going to look like, but there's going to be a lot of stuff on there that is going to determine what Dallas looks like in the next 10 and 20 years. So if you care about Dallas, you will make it down the ballot. These are one of the great things, actually.
Whether it's to say yes or no.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's yes or
because
no.
people have different views.
Let me actually put this out there. One of the things I love about this initiative is that when people give money to it, or when people support it, or when people sign this is different than just voting for a politician, hoping that they have integrity, hoping that they have competence, hoping that they work well with others and they actually get something done. When you vote on this, you are making the change yourself. That's a big deal.
And the fourth citizen-led amendment that's going to be on the charter, on the ballot for the charters, is going to be something about what 4 ounces of marijuana or less is not going to be illegal. I'm curious, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm definitely not the spokesperson for that organization, but I know that I'm opposed to it.
Yeah.
Because
you're talking about putting more police on the streets.
Yeah, we're talking about putting more police. We're talking about a society that regards law and order more. Marijuana use in Texas is clearly illegal. This is not helpful for our society.
Let me ask you about I have 2 last questions. This is the first one. Getting into the actual language of this, is there any clearer way to write? This is the 4,000 police officers. Mm-hmm. This is what is likely going to be on the ballot, something like this. You're asking voters, for or against, shall the city charter be amended to prioritize an appropriation of year-over-year city revenue increases for specific public safety objectives, including funding the Dallas Police and Fire pension system, increasing the number of sworn police officers, and ensuring their pay is competitive? Did an attorney write that?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, an attorney did.
Is there a better way to say this?
An attorney did write that, but if we had tried to simplify those elements anymore, frankly, I think that a reasonable argument could have been made that it doesn't accurately reflect the proposed charter change language that we're looking for, because that's a page long.
Yeah.
Having this language in here accurately reflects the elements of that language.
I'll interrupt Whiteley's multiple final questions here and ask. So now you got to the finish line, and I joked with you when we first shook hands today that you've gotten through the finish line, and only to realize it's the starting line. Because now you've got to convince people leading up to November, and they've got plenty of other ads coming their way. But you guys are actually going to push out a campaign, a media campaign.
Yeah, we want voters to be informed. We're going to need support to do that. We're going to need to get commercials out there. We're going to need to get people educated about what these actually say. There's going to be a high participation in this election, and we want the people that are going to get all the way down the ballot to know what this is about. So yes, you're right. We've got a lot of work ahead of us.
So you're going to be bombarding me, at least in some forums.
I am. Yeah.
But am I also going to see somebody who doesn't agree with what you're proposing probably sending out some ads too?
Not yet. We don't have a person like that yet, and I hope that people take a moment to not turn this into a partisan issue. It is a nonpartisan issue. We have tremendous support from both sides of the aisle. We have tremendous support from all over Dallas. This is a very common issue.
But for the record, conservatives are behind this.
No, I mean, we actually have plenty of people from the other side of politics.
I didn't look up how you voted, but the president of this is a former state rep who's a conservative.
So I'm the executive director. I think you're referring to Stephanie Carter. So she's on the board.
Former state rep. She's a Republican. There's conservative money behind this.
No, well, there's also liberal money behind this, and so I don't know the actual balance and mix of what that is, but this is a broad coalition. There are people from all over Dallas that are involved in this. It is truly nonpartisan.
How much is this campaign going to cost over the next 3 months, do you figure? How much are you guys trying to set aside or raise?
Yeah, we're thinking on the low end it's probably going to be $1.8 million, and on the top end it's going to be $3 million. Our goal here, unlike most political campaigns, is not to raise maximum dollars. Our goal is to raise good strategic partners who care about Dallas. That's it. And it could be from any political party. We're just looking for people who care about Dallas.
To put a finer point on the partisan part of it, because I think a lot of people were surprised. We did podcasts about this. A lot of people were surprised a couple of years ago when we had these quote unquote, nonpartisan school board elections, which, people don't have an R or a D next to their name in those. And yet there was a concerted political effort going on there. And a lot of people, I think, were taken off guard by that until after the election was over. So, you're a former Trump appointee. accountability to several different departments. As Jason was talking about, the highest person on the board is a former Republican representative. But you're saying that within the organization there, I mean, you guys call yourselves a nonpartisan effort. Within the organization there, you have just as many people who would identify as Democrats or independents.
Absolutely. And frankly, in the signature side of the people who were the petitioners and the people who were signing the petitions, frankly, I would say we're probably higher on the left side of things. My background is on getting things done. It is not in partisan politics. And so the reason I'm involved in this is to see Dallas thrive and to see a better Dallas.
What do you think about the ability of ordinary citizens to be able to sign on to a petition like this and affect change in their government?
Sorry, say that again?
The ability of ordinary citizens to sign a piece of paper, and if enough of them do that, to be able to change how their government works.
I mean, it's incredibly inspirational. I mean, I think it's the core of what we are as a people. I mean, if you're not involved in this and you're not signing these petitions and you're not using your opportunity to vote, why would you give that up? That is like just the core of who we are as Americans, is our right to participate. And so I encourage everybody, wherever you are on the political spectrum, to get out and support this. It's going to be better for Dallas. There's no way that having a floor and saying a minimal level of security, accountability, and enforcement is not a good thing for
Now,
Dallas.
Texas is one of those states that doesn't allow us to do that at a state level. Should we?
You know, I don't know if that's the right way to approach it. I think Texas has some good laws that make sure that they push decision making to the local level. And what I've seen from my work overseas, everywhere that I've been, I saw the most effective stabilization, the most effective economic thriving happening from good, legitimate decision making at the local level.
So local control.
Yeah, local control, local leaders that were making good decisions. And so when the citizens stand up just like this and say, we are requiring a minimum threshold for you, this is a clear signal of what you need to do.
Republicans in the state legislature have been picking apart local control for a decade plus.
I don't know every single one of those. Obviously, there's Republicans right now are very divided in the state legislature on many issues. There's some very serious issues going there. But I think that ultimately giving issues to you maintain a certain floor, obviously, at the state level, and then you say, well, hey, we want the locals to decide what's best for them.
So my last question is something Wheeler kind of already asked, since he interrupted my series of last questions. Last question was, what kind of, I mean, if you guys are trying to raise, $2 to $3 million to promote this and get people to vote for it on the ballot, what do you expect in opposition to this? Do you expect there to be an organized opposition effort?
If there is an organized opposition, then I think we'll probably have to raise more money, but I don't think it changes the outcome. This is something that Dallas wants.
And then the last thing I'm curious about is, are there any other cities in the state of Texas that have passed any of these three?
Save Austin Now has obviously had some similar. There's no other language like this. This is all original language. So
to Dallas.
Yeah, this is all first. It's an original, and frankly, this is a template that I think other states, other cities should be inspired by, because we have to address this just completely misguided effort to defund police. There's nothing behind that makes sense. And so there needs to be police reform. There needs to be better training. There needs to be better information for citizens. People need to have a better relationship with their police departments. But at the end of the day, as a country, at the local level, we have to start reversing these defund the police efforts that have just been so terrible, and some of them have been.
But that never happened in the city of Dallas.
But it did.
But the city council never actually defunded police. They've been adding to the salaries.
See, but I would argue that sometimes that stuff happens very surreptitiously, and when you have crafty bureaucrats who know how to reallocate a budget and say, well, hey, we're just going to slide up. When you lose 1,000 police officers 9 years running, somebody is literally defunding the police.
Well, if I would say, I mean, I'm not going to defend anybody who might be doing that, but the defund the police effort doesn't go as far back as Dallas's problems with trying to hire police. I mean, that's been going on for 15 plus years, maybe longer than that.
Yeah, so
sort of unsuccessfully.
Yeah, so
Dallas couldn't figure this out a long time before this defund the police thing.
No, I actually really appreciate that you raised the cultural challenges that people who aspire to be law enforcement officers face, and the fact that it has become depopularized for youth, and it shouldn't be that way. These are people serving our community. They are our heroes, and we need to regard them that way. And so that's why we've called this Dallas Hero. This is to honor them. It's to make sure that the people who are taking care of us, we're taking care of them.
Pete Morocco, Executive Director of Dallas Hero. Do you have any other last questions? Or?
No more last questions. A few statements, though, I'd like to make. I've discovered what boulet means.
Oh, have you? How did you figure that out during this?
I just want to give a shout out to Oak Cliff Brewing Company. They opened a little early for us. The tap room opens here in the beer hall
Oak Cliff
at 4
Beer Hall.
o'clock.
Yes.
4 in the afternoon, and they were kind enough to open early because you had to be here early, Wheeler. So people bow to you all the time. And
Well,
I'm
we must
grateful
have
for them
liked it
doing
because everybody's glass is pretty much empty here.
They're smaller glasses, but it was fantastic.
You drank an IPA.
The Lee Hazy Oswald is one I would buy regularly. I don't do a lot of IPAs.
Black Lager was great.
Yeah,
Was it?
was
I
good.
thought about that one after the fact. It's got, what was it, notes of coffee, cold
yeah.
brew in it, which sounds amazing.
wonderful.
That's good
Did you
stuff.
pick that up, Pete?
I did.
Yeah?
It's
Okay.
good afternoon.
Very nice.
Good stuff. Thanks so much for listening. We always appreciate that. If you have some feedback for us on our language in this, let Wheeler know, and he'll make sure to respond to it. If there's something you liked, please let me know.
My language has been a work in progress my whole life. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody.
Thank you.